Welcome to Sedona Soul Sisters Show, down-to-earth discussions on spirituality, metaphysics, paranormal, and healing topics. The Sedona Soul Sisters are the most trusted psychic mediums in Sedona, Arizona. We are, myself, Ivory LaNoue, Rozlyn Reynolds, who will be back in a moment, Terri Ann Russell, Onya-Sophia, who is trying to get into the room for the first time right now, and Robert Markham, who'll be joining us very shortly. We have offices in Sedona, Arizona, where we see clients from all over the world. Today's topic is Lyrans. It's our first show of the month where we always focus on alien race and alien culture and the planet they came from and the starseed associated with that. So this is one that's kind of near, it's a little bit near and dear to my heart for a reason I've shared with Terri Ann before, but Terri Ann, this is so much more your area than mine. Do you want to talk a little bit about the Lyrans?
Yeah, well, that's why I picked it, honestly, because of you. Because we talk about who we're going to pick each week. But yeah, so we have races, right? That we talk races and star seeds a little bit different, right? If you want to start with races, so we each have these races that were on planets or star systems, billions of years ago. And so Lyra specifically is a star system in the Milky Way galaxy. It's got the Vega star, which is one of the brightest stars in the sky, and it looks like almost like a lopsided square when you were looking at it. I was looking at it earlier, but it's got the Delta and Zeta binary star system as well. So if you think about it, it makes sense. I always say, we've done a couple of these shows now, and I always say, think about it as if it's like your nationality, right? We all have different nationalities and we come from different places around our world. It would make sense then, as a star being, that we have some sort of galactic DNA. And in the beginning, I thought it was really out there too, when I first started experiencing stuff with the galactics, and then it just became second nature to me because it was always something that I was drawn to. So as a race, there's several different types, I guess, of Lyrans, if you want to put them in categories. There's so if you have Lyran as the top broader category, then there's subcategories, which is, again, like us, different pieces of different planets or star systems that have connected to come into one, if that makes sense. I hope I'm describing it okay.
Well, I actually read a whole lot about this race. It's funny, I just didn't do it till now after finding out what you told me on a previous show, but it was very interesting to read about the history of their planet and what happened and why they can't go home.
Yeah, and so yeah, it's a lot of craziness. But what attracted to me about the Lyrans, and there's in the beginning, when I first started connecting with the galactics, there was this symbol they kept showing me, and I didn't understand what it was. It didn't look like your typical, symbol. And as I was also doing some research and reading about this symbol, it turns out it's a lyre, which is like a harp. You know what that is?
Yeah, I do.
But it was weird because it was the way they were showing me the symbol, it was just these S's that were backwards originally. So it wasn't like a typical lyre or harp. But so that is one of the symbols that they use too. I've had clients who have done past life hypnosis, past life regression, or spiritual hypnosis, that have described what the planet had looked like when they were there. And the memories, when you're under hypnosis, they're just, they're from our subconscious. And so they start coming in, and people are always amazed after a session because they're like, oh, well, I didn't even know that, or I never, where did that come from? And I'm like, well, that's all part of you, your soul, right? It makes sense. Your soul, your spirit has lived before. And so when your soul incarnates into you in this lifetime, it carries those memories that are embedded from where it came from, or what it's done. So then when people see it like that, they sort of understand it more. So let's see. From what I know about the Lyrans is they're usually very tall. They can be average size to very tall. A lot of them have red hair, as you know.
I didn't know that.
No? Okay, so
No.
that's one of those subcategories that they fall under. There are some, they're very light skinned with light eyes. Um, Beautiful, beautiful features. It reminds me very much of you. When I look at your features, they're so beautiful and so pristine, I feel. You know, very light, very, the hair is very, just beautiful. So a lot of them are vegetarian. They don't believe in harming any, you know, creatures or animals. So they're very much connected with nature. They're very much connected with the environment. Makes sense for you again, right?
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, if you want to look online or if anybody wants to look further, like I said, there's the category of Lyrans, and then there's these subcategories, which are some are Lyran, redheaded Lyrans, or you know whatever. So there's different subcategories. So you can definitely Google everything nowadays and find out everything you need to know.
The only thing for me, Terri Ann, I have to say is like, though I loved cats very much as a child, I found out I'm tremendously allergic to them.
Yeah.
Isn't that sort of like being allergic to your ancestors?
Yeah, and so that's one of the subgroups also is there's a feline Lyran, but they are very much like the Egyptians. You know, that resonates with me a lot too. Is we have a cat now, and I watch her, and if I'll bring out my sound healing or something, she comes running wherever she is, and she lays on the bed, and she just watches me play my crystal bowl. Uh, so it's amazing. So those Lyrans have like cat-like features. They're not typically just like a cat, but they have cat-like features. So they have bigger eyes, you know, able to, you know how the cat's eyes go when they're really like thin in the middle, and then when they see something, they start to open up like that. So the Lyrans have that sort of clairvoyancy. As we use it in our third eye, but the Lyrans sort of have it within their eyes. So like the cat's eye is skinny, and then it opens up like that.
Interesting. What,
Very
so
interesting.
I know there's a lot of them like amongst us on the planet. Would they have eyes like that?
They usually have bigger eyes that stand out. I can't see your eyes now, but
My
so
eyes are not bigger. I've got like the Oriental style eyes where people always think, "Oh, I thought you were going to be Chinese." I'm like, "No, no, I'm Irish." But
Chinese Irish. Yeah. So again, we talk about these characteristics or traits. It's like our nationalities. You're not going to have every trait or every characteristic of that nationality, you know. But there are some people that I have seen that have that like the cat, the skinnier type of. I don't know, I forget what they call it, but you know what I'm talking about. It's like just like.
like the pupil being,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I've seen that too. Actually, I know, like, when you're describing that, I'm thinking about some people I know who have that feline look where their cheekbones are very accentuated and large eyes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like with the Palladians, like they have a longer neck, you know what I mean? So we each race has their own attributes. And so again, you may have some attributes or characteristics. You know, you won't have all of them or whatever. But so star seeds, as we get into star seeds, there's so many characteristics about star seeds that interest me because people are really like looking for I guess, a label like why am I like this? Or, you know, where does this come from? And so a lot of times when you look at the star seed, it can explain it to them a little bit easier why they're like that. You know, like Lyrans, for example, are very adventurous. So, you know, they are more apt to do some research and maybe take some risks there. So uh, then they can look at that and say, oh, well, that could be a Lyran characteristic or it can be something else. Usually when I'm doing this type of work and somebody wants specifically to know, I tune into their higher self and I speak to their higher self. And I usually hear whatever star planet system or, you know, where they came from. Like if it's Polaris or, you know, Lyran or Vega or Pleiades, whatever it is. So that's how I discern, you know, and we can have a couple too, like there's some that are double star seeds, if that makes sense.
It does. I'm thinking back It was so crazy during that time when I was wide awake, and multiple times, maybe 5 to 7 times, I was suddenly in in a different place. And I'm, instead of in my bedroom on my bed, I'm lying on my side outdoors, and I'm looking through grass up at the, and I've described this to you as a big pyramid. And oh, I'm getting chills as I tell you this. And I could feel the breeze on my face, and no windows were open in the bedroom. And the pyramid is so big it's eclipsing my bedroom. I don't see my bedroom at all. And there's a big oval carved lion's head on the side of it. And I always was so curious. Like, I ran that by so many people, and they're like, I don't know, I've never heard of a pyramid with a lion's head. And then I told you, and you're like, oh my gosh, Ivory, I think that you were really like in the Lyran, maybe even on their planet, before it was destroyed. But it was very powerful, and I remember I stayed there as long as I could. Is it normal for people to have experiences like that, like waking experiences of a planet that they're a starseed of?
I think the more that we are awakening, the more prevalent those visions or experiences are becoming. Because if you think back about it, when you were first awakening, or it didn't really we'd start having these visions or experiences, but it really didn't make any sense at that time. And how I describe it is we had like a longer time to assimilate all these changes. But now with the awakening that's happening, people are like, they're in it, right? And so it's kind of freaky sometimes to just be all of a sudden everything is coming in very strongly. So I'd say now, this time that we're in, yes, it's probably normal for people to have some sort of extraterrestrial experience, paranormal experience, or a vision or astral travel, all of those things, because we're so much more aware of it.
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, I did read about how there was a split, and why there was a split in the population of the Lyrans, how they went, kind of became part of other races to save themselves and escape the attack on their planet. That was pretty heady, intense stuff.
Yeah, and if you think back about it, the draconians and the reptilians, all of that energy is still very prevalent in our world today, right? So it could be almost like as if it's like a mirror effect, what happened with them, what's going on with us. And so I think, there's a lot of merit to it when you read these things on the internet. And I always say, check your research and do what you need to do to see if you can verify that. But again, like you were saying, you had such a resonance with what you were seeing, that type of feeling. If you're reading something, it's really resonating with you, you're getting goosebumps or chills, or you're starting to experience any types of vision or hearing, I'd say definitely that you've been part of that experience, what you're reading about.
That makes sense. And it can be powerful. I mean, even in 84, when I had my major spiritual awakening, it's not like I wasn't already on the path, but just a more intense, rapid expansion. That was so overpowering. I truly thought I was going crazy. So if it's happening even faster, harder for people now, that is mind blowing. That's I have a lot of people coming to me and just feeling like their head is spinning, and a lot of it is things like this. Like they're really feeling this intense draw to a specific race, to a specific planet, to the stars in general. It's very interesting. I think there's a powerful awakening happening with that overall as well.
Yeah, I think the information that I received probably a few years ago from my guides was, it's like um, an activation will occur when that person is ready to be able to accept, not necessarily, know everything or even understand what it is, but when that person has like unlocked enough of themselves to be able to accept that information now that's going to start to come through. And the time we're in is very powerful, right? There's so many changes that are occurring, and so many people, I have to say that galactics, it seems so like sci-fi sometimes, what we've been programmed to believe it is. And it's not like that, you know. So we've been, you know, shown the movie Alien, for example, and you know, there are some darker, you know, entities around, obviously, but that's not with the majority of it that's coming into us to connect with us. You know, that's part of who we are, that lineage that we carry. So I think that that's the fear that comes around all of that is what we've been programmed to believe it is.
Yeah, and that's a real shame because I know most of the beings that have come to me with really pretty primarily have been extremely high frequency, and I would compare it to the frequency of angels.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what they feel like. We've talked about that on the show before. If they feel like, I always get like an overwhelming feeling of love and I want to cry. It's like in my heart and it's just within me, you know. And so if it feels like that, it's usually high frequency energy. I start to sometimes shake if they're like in my presence, in my field, I may start to shake too. So that's a good way to discern what you're connecting with.
That's interesting. Would you describe that as like this vibration, almost like you're very terrified, only you're not?
But yeah, similar, because so like I know we're not talking about spirit, but like when Anthony first, my son who passed, first started coming in to my field, it wasn't a feeling of fear, but it was like that excitement. But how he described it was like he's so high in frequency and then I'm so much lower in frequency, and we have to sort of meet in the middle somewhere. And so like you would explode or whatever if, you know, you had all that energy in you.
Yeah, I can imagine that for sure.
Yeah, so it's like that like excitement type of, you know, feeling, and it's like it's, you know, it's so hard to put into words. It's such a a beautiful experience, but it's really hard to verbalize sometimes.
It is. There's a lot of things. And, you know, I feel like because I had no one to talk to when these things were first happening, like I had to just figure it out on my own and wait till I met somebody who had experienced it and knew what it was. I'm so grateful to have you here, and you know, I think it's great to have Onya-Sophia here and people who are really well versed in these things because though I've had an intense interest in it for years, it's not my area of expertise. It's not what I've studied. It's, you know, I've read, but I haven't studied it like you guys have.
Right.
Welcome, Robert. I'm glad you're here. So, what about this planet that they had? Do you want to talk about what happened there?
With the draconians.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were attacked and taken over, and I I don't know a lot of history about it, but they were taken over, so they had to flee to other planets, right? Um, and when they fled, so they interconnected with other beings on other planets. So that's how you have the category of Lyrans and then the subcategories of Lyrans. So again, just like humans are, you know, when we first came from Europe and we intermingled with people that were on the other side of the world, we have different characteristics and everything that we bring in when our genetics are passed down through those nationalities. But yeah, I don't know a lot about what exactly happened. Have you read more about that?
You know, let me find that. There was something here, I was just reading about it last night, and I think it was that draconians and reptilians kept attacking their planet, and that they decided, I can't find that particular passage, but they decided, a lot of the Lyrans decided they had to go ahead and they ascended to another dimension to avoid that. And then some others joined with Pleiadians and other races and became part of their race. Some of them decided to come to Earth, you know, and then to various planets to help us ascend. But basically, then I guess their planet was completely destroyed. There's nothing to go back to.
Mm-hmm.
That's just has to be a horrible feeling.
Oh, absolutely, I'm sure. But they're very peaceful beings, like we were saying earlier, very attached to nature. Animals, cats and birds in particular, they're very much connected with them. So, any type of disturbance that the draconians would bring in, was really, from what I know, a big upheaval, like you said, at that time. And it's just sad. And it's similar, like I said earlier, what's going on with our planet now with all the draconian influence that we have.
I know that they're here to help us ascend, to guide us towards ascension and helping us move towards that higher dimension as they have. Apparently, they only did that in the last 200 or 300 years. So I don't, and yet their race is millions of years old. So I guess we can't fault ourselves for it taking so long and being such a journey. It's not easy. It's sort of like the more people involved in a vacation, the harder it is to get anything done. You're sort of dragging this iron ball around. So you've got this planet where more than half the planet doesn't even know about what's going on with needing to raise frequency, and so we're pulling, trying to pull. But in reality, I think it's going to be a lot like the Lyrans race, where those who are ready ascend, and those who are not, they need to continue on their journey until they come to that point. It just makes sense. You can't make somebody go forward on their journey to a point they're not ready to achieve.
Right. We've talked about that several times. It's like the old adage, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. We can give you the tools that you need. And, I've had several experiences with family, give them the tools they need, but if they want to do it, it's truly up to them to do what they need to do.
My
But I
God.
think, when you're on our side of it, you can see like so much. Like if you watch, I don't watch TV a lot. My husband watches a lot of TV, but I'm like, we see things so differently sometimes. And I'm like, did you catch that? Like everything is about programming, It's like, that's off topic, but sorry.
Maybe that's a topic we need to talk about. Oh, Robert, you want to say something?
Yeah, it was interesting. You talk about can't force anybody to do anything, and the concept of ascension, which seems to be sort of synonymous with like enlightenment. That kind of the way I look at it, and or self-realization. And there's a author I really like, David Hawkins. I've talked about before, but he said, I think he said Gautama the Buddha said this is, or supposedly said it, that is to even have heard of enlightenment, to even have heard of ascension, is a great benefit to yourself, because once you've heard about it, once you've even had it, an attempt, someone has attempted to even describe it to you, nothing else compares, in your knowing. And so he almost says it's like you'll just be attracted to it over time. So even to have heard of it, or even to mention the idea of ascending to somebody, is to give them a great benefit. And I thought that was interesting because it allows us to sit. It just takes us to a place of encouragement and suggestion to other people, and that's just a very easy place to be. You're not trying to pull anybody in any direction. You're just suggesting this very, very, very high consciousness, high frequency concept to them, the concept of ascension.
I agree with that 100%. And as you're telling that, Robert, I see it like a key in a lock. And it's almost like that person doesn't even know the lock is there and doesn't even know the key is in it. And yet, when you mention this term to them, like it turns that lock, and then they have this ability to start seeing things in new ways, seeing things they haven't noticed before, seeing things in a different light. And that's true. It's not just true of the word ascension, but it's true of a lot of things. And in my life, I've learned that something we can say to another person, it can seem so casual and so, unimportant. And then you find out years later, like it was life changing for them in some
Hmm.
way. It like sent them on a new positive direction. And that can definitely happen in this realm of, alien beings, starseed. Like, what if nobody's ever heard of starseed? And there's that key and the lock, and that concept now is new to them. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. it's like how it's said to them as well. If it's said with an odor of control, it could be repulsive. But if it's said with the intention, like we talked about before, the intention of, let's say, lovingness, which I've heard it said could be described like divine love is maybe that inspiration to tell someone about starseed or ascension. It is purest form. It is exquisitely gentle yet infinitely powerful. Would be like maybe a way to describe God. And uh, that there's like a certain gentle authority that comes with that too. And maybe that's inspiring to individuals too. So it's not just mentioning starseed or ascension, but it's like doing it in a very gentle and inviting way. Maybe just a thought.
And I don't feel like it's any coincidence that all this is going on at this time, and so many people are starting to hear these words or have these experiences and meet people that have had these experiences. I don't think there's any coincidences behind that.
I don't either. I mean, I just don't. That's another thing at this point in life. I just don't believe there are coincidences. Things just are falling into place, coming into alignment, and bringing us to where we're meant to be. Some of the things I was reading about, and I just wonder what you thought about this, Terri Ann, since this is one of your areas of expertise, is talking about some of the other aspects of a person possibly being a Lyran starseed, was that they'll have the strong sense of purpose, a strong feeling of purpose. And even if they don't know what it is, like they'll know they're here for a reason, and they feel the strong desire to find it, even if they have no clue what it is. And drawn to science fiction and paranormal in general, and just feeling like they maybe even have been a part of that in some way, like it really resonates with them. And being able to discern that there's an underlying truth in so-called science fiction, paranormal topics. But another one was realizing that, coming to the place where they realize humans are capable of so much more. Even if like other people are saying we're hopeless, there's no hope for this race, we're just going down, this is the end. You know in your heart that's not true. Like we can do so much more. We can rise, we can elevate, we can raise our frequency, we can become a more loving race of people, helping one another. Like I know that in my heart. I know that is true. And I know many other people feel the same way. Another thing too is like they seem, and I'm not saying I do, but I'm saying it's that they seem to have an underlying sense of power about them, and that also people want to go to them to tell them their troubles. That's why I became a counselor, by the way, a therapist. Like I got into mental health because people were always telling me their story anyway and what was going on with them. So figured I might as well make it a career. But that's something apparently is pretty prevalent. And I think there's, of course, a lot of crossover. I've heard some of these same traits with other things. They're, like Terri Ann, you say this all the time, like there's crossover in so many things, and we're not just one thing. We're probably not one starseed. We're not just this. So if you're hearing this and going, oh, that's so general, that could be this, that, and the other, you're right. It could be other things too.
Exactly. The vision I get, like when I connected before we met today, the vision I got was like, it's like that puzzle. I don't know if you guys ever, it's like a wooden puzzle and there's like a ball in it. Do you remember that one, what I'm talking about? And you can like move, it's like a game, and you can like move the maze so that you're moving the ball to get to where the hole is. Well, that's what I'm seeing like with Lyrans. Like they're very much problem solvers. They can like tilt one way or the other. They have the ability to pivot, if you will, back and forth. So from one thing to another very easily. And so they're really good problem solvers too.
I just think it's great when we can name as many of these things as possible because, like you said earlier, Terri Ann, not every Lyran starseed will have every trait that's mentioned. So the more we mention, the more it gives you a chance of going, oh, I do have that one, that one, and that one, and that one. So maybe, and really the definitive thing is probably like, what do you feel in your soul? What do you feel inside? Do you feel like this little kapow, like, oh my gosh, I think I might be a Lyran starseed? I want to look into that. I want to read a book. I want to have a reading with Terri Ann and see, if that's true, see what comes up about that.
Yeah, and like you were saying, when you were talking, immediately that's what I heard about you when we were talking weeks or months ago, and you had that. I'm like, oh my gosh. So that's just easy how it happens for me. I just, like I said earlier, we could be in a session and I can be working with somebody, and if it's, I'll ask the higher self, what resonates with you. And usually they're like, yeah, that resonates. Or in a spiritual hypnosis session, if we're looking at that, it depends on what you're looking for. But I always say, for me, because I'm clairsentient, I'm very feeling, right? So I always say, go by what you feel. Like you said, if it resonates with you, do you see? Are you clairvoyant? Have you had these experiences where you can see that you've been on another planet or another star system? Are you clairaudient? Can you hear what comes through when you're looking at that and connecting? And that's that level of discernment that we talk about too, because nobody can tell you but you, right? You're the one that has to discern whether this information that's coming through is accurate for you. You're the one that has to be able to do that. And then, when we talk about doing your work, right? We go back into doing your work. If that resonates with you, how are you going to start to look at what that is about, and how you're going to learn more about it so that you can understand? Because we all came here for a purpose, right? We all came here to do something in our mission, and our soul is looking to facilitate what those changes are for us to go further on our purpose.
Go ahead, Robert.
Hey, Terri Ann, in your experience, you say only the person can know, right? I think that's kind of what you said. The only person can know. And would you say that if you were guiding them through this process of revelation, that you could say, okay, it's a sign that you're on the right track. If whatever the knowing is, it's peaceful. It's a release almost. It's almost like, yeah, it's a release almost. It's like you were kept from something, and now you have been allowed access to it. And if they have fear, then perhaps that's I don't know, would you say that's a marker that maybe this falsehood, it's not something,
not necessarily, because some people have fear around different things for different reasons, whatever, their soul, maybe not fully understanding what that fear is about when we do past life regression with those fears that come up. But I think you weren't here earlier. We were talking about that. What did we say earlier, Ivory? Do you remember?
I do not.
Uh-oh.
It went.
It went right over, right? We were talking about, it went right over my head now too. Sorry. But yeah, so I think, it's my opinion. I believe that we all have to take responsibility in what we, are looking at, and discerning what resonates with us and what doesn't resonate. People watching this show are going to think we're freaking crazy. So, whatever resonates with you, I'm okay with. I believe that I'm merely here to guide you. Like you said, where you're coming to me, I'm not searching these people out. When people come to me, they're looking for answers for something that has already been awakened. That's what we're talking about. Something has been awakened within them already. And at this time period that we're in, a lot of awakening is occurring. So they are at the point where their soul believes that they are ready to accept what that information is. And I believe that's when they seek out our services, because they're looking now for their answers. It's not like they've gone and researched these things. These things have just, like, for me, example, I was never interested in the galactics. I probably had some experiences when I was younger that I blocked out. And as I've gone deeper on my path, those have resurfaced. But I was never out there specifically looking for a galactic connection. And I always said I saw spirit, but I never connected with extraterrestrials. And when I came to Sedona, those things, and this is when I met Roz, and I came to Sedona and I said to her, you're going to think I'm crazy. Like, oh my God, now I'm having these extraterrestrial experiences, right? And so I wasn't, looking for that to happen. That happened organically. And I think that's the way that most times it happens.
Oh my
I
gosh.
totally agree.
Go ahead, Roz. Go ahead.
I just totally agree with that. I have met people who have and talk about seeking out the telepathic connections and the connections with the galactics. I think most of the people that I have encountered that have come to my office and said, I was told to come to you, which is always interesting to me because I'm thinking, really? Seriously, about the galactics? Okay. But it's pretty funny because in reality, when suddenly all that information starts flowing in, most people think they're going nuts. So it's a hard walk to embrace that.
It is. And I was telling Terri Ann earlier, I don't know if you two were here then, but like when I was 12 and 13, I was having all these experiences with UFOs and the aliens, and my parents were completely shut down to all of that. They didn't want to hear about it. And I started obtaining those Chariots of the Gods books, which was the best thing I could find. And I read them until literally the pages were falling out and, just disintegrating. And my parents kept trying to take them away from me, and I'd get new copies of them. And I just was hungry for information. What is this? What is happening? But the fear you talked about, Terri Ann, like for so long, I would not tell anybody about my experiences. And when I worked in mental health, that increased tenfold for obvious reasons. There were people who were in the mental health system who'd been locked up in psychiatric hospitals for a very long time for saying that they had experiences like that. So, I'm smart enough to know, hey, here I am as a administrator in this psychiatric hospital. I'm going to keep that all to myself. But I kind of like leaving that business freed me, and I just don't care anymore. If people think that's crazy, okay, they're not there yet. They haven't had an experience. Their mind's not opened yet. Those who have need to hear us talk about this, and they need to hear us talk about these things openly, and the ones who need it, they're going to find it, and we're helping them. And that's how I look at it. And those people that think we're crazy, okay, that's all right. Hopefully they'll have some experiences of their own, and maybe not. There's people who think being psychic is crazy, and that's just, something you're born with. So go ahead, Robert.
Something when I got to Sedona, I stayed at this, first time I ever entered Sedona, I stayed in this Airbnb, and it was a very welcoming woman that owned the place. And she was like telling me, hey, look, Thunder Mountain. And I said, hey, yeah, mountain, that's cool. And she says, do you know what this is? And I said, not really. And she said, man, I've had visions of like a spaceship literally going into this mountain and things like that. And to me, I said, okay, I don't know, you're wrong. I mean, she can't prove to me it's right. She can't provide tangible proof, but I can't provide tangible disproof, right? And so it's like an inner honesty of saying, I think a great starting place with any of this is like not needing to control what anybody thinks, and that allows one to have an open mind because one doesn't become attached to what other people think in a way. And so it's like talking about this topic, right, is something that's pretty new to me. And I can't prove it, but I can't disprove it. But I can be interested in it. I can be curious. I can be inviting, keep an open mind. And it will be interesting to see what comes from that. And I don't really have any interest in taking any other disposition other than that. So I think it's neat. Might as well have an open mind, right? More likely to have more revelation and joy in life, things like this.
Amen, soul brother. What else can you tell us about the Lyrans or starseed, Terri Ann?
So what I was reading on the internet is a lot of jobs that they go for are inventors, designers, artists. They're creative with technology, and not surprisingly, healers. So a varied, type of people that a starseed may be interested in following a career in those fields. again, I see that maze with the ball and going through, and they like to problem solve and figure out how things work, and they're very intricate, like to get in there and get their hands on.
That sounds like Robert.
Well,
Yeah, I
it
was
would
about to say who did.
make sense, you know. I
Rem-
mean, if you look at everybody, you know, we've talked about this before. You know, again, we have all these different aspects of us, or aspects of our, like, you're Italian, so you're supposed to be like this. And, you know, people say to me all the time, I'm Italian, I'm 3/4 Italian. And they're like, how are you Italian? You know, and I'm like, well, you know, look at me, just because I'm not dark hair, dark eyes, that's my mother. She's Sicilian. My grandmother was Napolitan. So they're, you know, generally more light, but people believe because you're Italian, you need to be darker. You know, so it's similar to that. We each carry different traits, and I think as we grow and evolve, those traits can change too.
That's really interesting because it makes me think of ignorance. Like there's Northern Italians, there's plenty of Northern Italians that look just like you. I mean, if I was in Northern Italy, I saw you and you just spoke fluent Italian, I wouldn't think twice. Um, and so it's like maybe if all you ever knew was Southern Italy, you know, it's like I don't know. I lost my thought there, but
Well, it's
it's
what we're programmed to believe, right? We were talking about
right.
sci-fi and aliens. We were taught, you know, we were programmed to believe that alien, it came out of the guy's stomach, it's an alien, you know. So we're programmed to believe those things, and you know, they're not necessarily accurate. But that's where we're going. We're going to shift all that, right?
Yes, we are. And I need to make a correction because those who know the Lyran race are going to jump on this. I just found the information and I'm going to just correct their species. The Lyran species is almost 1 billion years old.
Wow.
That's just like, okay, we're not even babies in this journey, are we? We're just like these little microscopic specks. Go ahead. We've got time for one more thought, Robert.
So what Terri Ann said about what we've been told, what we've been conditioned to believe, which is that's what darkness wants. It wants you in the dark. It wants ignorance. That's where all of its power, its force comes from. And that's how tyrannical governments continue to get more power from their people, or any sort of hierarchy. So it made me think what we do know is true at this point, confirmable, is that even the United States government has kept so much from its citizens over the years, perhaps in the name of protecting them for homeland and security abroad. But I mean, if we know now, there's all these conspiracy theories that turned out to have lots of truth in them. And we're saying, okay, so it's true that the CIA or any agency or any person of power, of great wealth, has kept a lot of things from us. And this has happened over the whole world. It's like, then what's to say that they're not keeping deeper levels and dimensions of information from us? Like anything having to do with the word alien, what that represents, and so on, UFOs, all the things coming out now of declassification or whatever. And so I kind of just think, like, dare to believe that told is a lie, and maybe, you know, have the courage to do that and see what happens. A quote I love, it's this somehow resonates with me right now. It said, if you want to go on an adventure, tell the truth. It'll take you on the wildest adventure you've ever been on, because it will question your reality.
That's great.
I love that,
Yeah.
Robert. Thank you. Great way to
Yeah.
wrap up the show. You've been watching the Sedona Soul Sisters show. If you'd like more information about us or our services, visit our website, sedonasoulsisters.com. We thank you for joining us today. Subscribe and follow us. Tune in next Friday when the topic is Tools for Your Spiritual Journey in 2022. We'll all be sharing a few of our favorite tips for getting you through tumultuous times and kind of rising above the chaos and zooming ahead with your personal and spiritual growth. And we look forward to sharing that with you. In the meantime, we hope you have an enlightening week.